The day it all started, the sky over Maplehaven was the color of unpolished silver, a low, seamless canopy that seemed to press the anxiety deeper into my chest. It was a Wednesday. Wednesdays were supposed to be the hump day lull, a gentle slide toward the weekend. I remember the exact mundane details because trauma has a way of fossilizing the ordinary. I was wearing my blue scarf, the one with the faint coffee stain I'd never quite managed to lift. My daughter, Lily, was almost 3, a whirlwind of questions and stubborn opinions packed into a frame still soft with babyhood. She was insisting on wearing her rain boots, the bright yellow ones with frogs on them, though the forecast promised nothing but a grim drizzle. "Frogs like puddles, Mama," she stated, her brow furrowed with the immutable logic of the very young. "We have to be ready." "We'll be ready, sweet pea," I'd said, kneeling to fasten the stubborn buckle. Her daycare, Sunny Meadows Early Learning Center, was a 10-minute drive from our little Cape Cod-style house. We'd chosen it 18 months ago after an exhaustive search that felt more like applying for a state secret than enrolling a toddler. There were interviews, parent essays, observation periods. Sunny Meadows boasted a whole-child play-based curriculum, a nutritious organic menu, and a staff-to-child ratio that exceeded state requirements. The director, Eleanor Vance, had a voice like warm honey and eyes that crinkled when she talked about fostering resilient, joyful learners. The walls were painted in calming, nature-inspired hues. It smelled of lavender disinfectant and whole-grain crackers. It was, by all appearances, perfect. It was also the most expensive option in a 50-mile radius, a financial stretch that required careful budgeting and skipped lattes, a sacrifice my husband, David, and I made without a second thought. Her safety, her joy, was the non-negotiable center of our universe. The drop-off that morning was unremarkable. The cheerful cacophony of Sunny Meadows greeted us, the clatter of wooden blocks, the off-key chorus of "The Wheels on the Bus," the shriek of delighted laughter from the playground visible through the double-paned windows. Miss Melissa, Lily's primary teacher, swooped in with her usual effervescence. She was in her mid-20s with a perpetually cheerful ponytail and an endless supply of brightly patterned smocks. "Lilybug, you're a ray of sunshine in those boots," she chirped, taking Lily's small backpack. "We're doing sponge painting today, and I saved the biggest, messiest sponge just for you." Lily, usually hesitant for the first few minutes, went to her with a small smile, distracted by the promise of sanctioned mess. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and sleep. "Have a wonderful day, my love. I'll be right here at 3. Bye, Mama. Love you to the moon and the stickers," she recited, our silly, sacred litany. "Love you to the stars and the cars," I finished, my heart giving its usual tender squeeze. I drove to work, a graphic design firm in the next town, and plunged into the day's demands. A logo for a new microbrewery, a brochure for a dental practice. My mind was a split screen, Pantone swatches and the memory of Lily's sticky hand in mine. It was at 1:47 p.m. that the first thread pulled loose. I was in a client meeting when my phone, set to silent, lit up with a notification from the Sunny Meadows app, Brightwheel. This app was another selling point, a digital tether, providing photo updates, nap times, meal logs, and diaper changes in near real time, a little ping of connection throughout the day. The notification preview read, "Lily had a small accident during quiet time. We've changed her, and she's resting comfortably." A small accident. It happened. She was potty training, a process of triumphs and setbacks. I typed a quick, "Thanks for letting me know," and refocused on the client. But a tiny, formless knot of unease settled in my stomach. The phrasing felt off, clinical, resting comfortably. It was a term you'd use for a post-op patient, not a toddler who had a pee mishap. I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid, reading too much into a standardized message. At 2:30 p.m., another notification. A photo. My thumb swiped it open eagerly, hungry for a glimpse of her day. The smile died on my lips. The photo was of the cozy corner, a nook filled with pillows and soft books. Lily was in it, but she wasn't cozied up with a book. She was sitting alone, her back against the wall, her legs straight out in front of her. She held a stuffed elephant loosely in her lap, but it was her face that stopped my breath. Her eyes were downcast, fixed on nothing. Her lower lip was pushed out in a pronounced pout, but it wasn't a theatrical, manipulative pout. It was the expression of profound dejection, the empty, resigned sadness of a child who had given up. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes looked puffy, as if she'd been crying hard and had just run out of tears. The caption read, "Having some calm time after our busy morning." Calm time. She looked utterly defeated. This wasn't the vibrant, curious girl I'd dropped off. This was a child in a state of shutdown. A cold trickle of dread seeped into my veins. I exited the meeting with a mumbled excuse, my heart hammering against my ribs. I navigated to the daily report section. Her lunch log showed she had eaten only a few bites of her organic turkey and avocado roll-up, and none of her roasted sweet potato stars. She had napped for only 45 minutes, a fraction of her usual 2-hour stretch. The notes section, usually filled with cheerful anecdotes. Lily told a funny story about her stuffed dog at circle time. Was blank. I called David. His voicemail picked up immediately. He was in surgeries all afternoon. My voice was too high, too tight. "David, call me when you get this. Something's not right at daycare. Just call me." I spent the next 30 minutes in a hell of my own making, staring at that photo, zooming in on her face, analyzing every pixel of her posture. The frayed edge of the beloved Ellie the elephant's ear, the scuff on her right frog boot, the way one sock was slightly bunched at the ankle. I knew every detail of my child, and every detail in that image screamed silent distress. At 3 o'clock on the dot, I was in my car, driving faster than I should have through the gray drizzle. The 10-minute drive felt like an eternity. My mind raced through possibilities. Was she sick? Had she been bullied by another child? Had she been yelled at? The small accident and the calm time felt linked, a cause and effect I couldn't quite see. I pulled into the Sunny Meadows parking lot, my tires crunching on the wet gravel. The building, usually a beacon of cheerful primary colors, looked muted under the steel wool sky. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to assemble my face into something neutral, reasonable. Don't be the hysterical mom, I told myself. Gather information. The lobby was quiet, the administrative assistant, Brenda, typing briskly. Hi, Samantha. Early today? I just have a light schedule, I lied, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I'll just pop back and get her. Of course, they're just finishing up afternoon snack in the sunflower room. I walked down the hallway, the cheerful student artwork on the walls suddenly seeming garish, a veneer. I could hear the subdued chatter of children from Lily's classroom. I paused at the door, which had a large window at adult height, designed for observation. The scene inside was orderly. Children sat at low tables, finishing up apple slices and cheese cubes. Miss Melissa and her assistant, a college-aged girl named Chloe, were moving between tables, wiping spills, encouraging kids to eat. My eyes scanned for Lily. I found her at a table in the corner. She was sitting by herself, though the table had 4 chairs. In front of her was a small plate with untouched food. She wasn't crying, she was just sitting, one hand absently stroking the edge of her plate, her gaze vacant, looking out the window at the dripping playground. The other children seemed to give her a wide berth, not from malice, but as if she were an island they'd been instructed not to approach. The anger began then, a slow, hot coil in my stomach. This wasn't my child. My child would be chattering, negotiating for more cheese, laughing. This was a ghost of her. Miss Melissa looked up and saw me. Her cheerful smile flashed, but it didn't reach her eyes, which darted for a fraction of a second toward Lily, then back to me. Samantha, hi! She came to the door, opening it just a crack, a subtle barrier. We're not expecting you for another 20 minutes. Snack time's just wrapping up. I finished up early, I said composedly, my tone carefully flat. I saw the photo, the note about the accident. Is everything okay? Oh, goodness, yes, she said, her voice a notch too bright. Just a little potty trouble. It happens. She got a little upset, so we gave her some space in the cozy corner to regulate her emotions. We're big on self-regulation here. Self-regulation. The buzzword landed with a thud. My 2-year-old, who still needed help putting on her socks, was supposed to self-regulate her distress in isolation? She looked very sad, I said, stating the obvious, my eyes locked with Melissa's. Melissa's smile tightened. Her gaze slid away from mine. Lily, look, Mommy's here. Lily's head turned slowly. When she saw me, her face didn't light up with its usual sunburst joy. A wave of relief did cross her features, but it was followed immediately by a trembling of her lower lip. She slid off her chair and ran to me. But it wasn't a run of excitement. It was a desperate, stumbling flight. She buried her face in my legs, her small arms wrapping around my thighs with a grip of iron. I stood. Lily slept fitfully that night, a small furnace of anxiety between us in the bed. She woke twice, crying out wordlessly, her little body rigid with a terror she couldn't name. Each time, David or I would soothe her, whispering reassurances that felt hollow even to our own ears. By dawn, we were all ragged, shadows bruising the space under our eyes. The morning routine was a minefield. The mere suggestion of putting on her clothes, how about the dinosaur shirt, triggered a meltdown of epic proportions. She thrashed, screamed, no school, no Melissa, dark, until she was hoarse. It was a raw, primal fear we'd never witnessed. This went far beyond standard morning reluctance. This was the behavioral echo of trauma. David called the hospital, canceling his non-urgent appointments. I emailed my clients, citing a family emergency. Our professional lives, the scaffolding of our adult identity, instantly bent to the single, non-negotiable priority in our living room, sobbing into her oatmeal. She's not going back, David said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He was still in his scrubs from the early shift he'd intended to work, the green fabric at odds with the domestic chaos. Not today, not until we know exactly what the closet room is and what happened in it. We spent the morning engaged in a delicate, heartbreaking form of espionage. We didn't interrogate Lily. We played. We built Duplo towers and crashed toy cars. We cuddled on the couch with a pile of books. We waited, letting the safety of home loosen the knots of her fear. Slowly, in fragments, between the pages of Goodnight Moon and the demolition of a block bridge, a story emerged. It was a child's narrative, a mosaic of feeling and image rather than linear fact. I had the pee-pee, she whispered, shame coloring her voice. In my pants. It was warm and then cold. That's okay. Accidents happen, David murmured, stroking her hair. Miss Melissa, her face got loud. She scrunched her own face, mimicking not a yell, but a tight, angry expression. She said, Again, Lily? This is not okay. "Then what happened, Bug?" I asked, keeping my voice a soft, neutral instrument. "She took my pants. She wiped my legs. It was cold. She said I had to go to the thinking chair." The thinking chair, a new term, a sanitized synonym. Where is the thinking chair? Lily's gaze drifted to the hall closet, the one where we kept winter coats and vacuum cleaner parts. "In the little room, the one with the brooms. The door goes click." She made a soft, final sound with her tongue. My blood ran cold. A utility closet. "Did you sit in the chair?" A slow nod. "For all the songs." "What songs, honey?" "The clean-up songs and the hello song." Her lower lip trembled. "It was a long, long time. I cried. I said, 'I need mommy.' The door was hard. I banged." She demonstrated a weak, small fist against her knee. "Nobody came. Then my nose was runny, and I was tired." The timeline crystallized with horrific clarity. The accident occurred post-lunch during what they called quiet preparation before nap. The cleanup song, the hello song, that was the post-nap transition, a period of at least 90 minutes. They had left our 2-year-old daughter locked in a dark utility closet for over an hour. The rage that bloomed in my chest was so vast and white it was silent. David had gone pale, the hand not holding Lily clenched into a fist so tight his knuckles were bone. "Was there a light in the room, sweetheart?" he asked, his surgeon's voice eerily calm. She shook her head. "Just the crack under the door. It was dark. It smelled like the yucky floor. Disinfectant. Bleach." "Did this happen before?" I managed to ask, the question tasting like ash. Lily shrugged, a tiny, hopeless gesture. "Sometimes the chair, sometimes just the corner. If you spill or talk too loud or don't finish your sun butter." She picked at the seam of her pajama pants. "Charlie cries a lot in the chair. He kicks the door." Another child. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was a policy, a covert, systematic use of isolation and fear to manage toddler behavior. David stood abruptly, walking to the kitchen window, his back to us, shoulders rigid. I held Lily closer, rocking us both, trying to soothe a tremor that originated deep in my own core. We needed more than our daughter's testimony. We needed corroboration, a pattern. We needed to know how deep the rot went. Our first move was digital reconnaissance. We combed through every photo, every note on the Brightwheel app for the last 6 months. What had once seemed like charming snapshots now felt like evidence. We looked for backgrounds, for the expressions of other children. We found 3 other photos tagged as calm time or taking a break. In each, the child, a little boy with glasses, a girl with red pigtails, had the same hollow, resigned look Lily had worn. The background was always a blur, but in one, if you zoomed in to the pixelated edge, you could see a mop bucket in the corner. We reviewed the meal logs. We cross-referenced days Lily had barely eaten with days she'd been unusually quiet at pickup. The correlation wasn't perfect, but it was there. Days of reported great eating and happy play were rare. More common were notes like needed encouragement to eat or quiet during circle time. "They're documenting their own neglect," David said grimly, staring at the spreadsheet we'd created. "The encouragement is probably a threat. The quiet is shut down." Next, we turned to the parent community. Maplehaven was a small town wrapped in a thick blanket of polite silence. Disrupting that silence was a social risk, but our child's well-being vaporized any concern for niceties. I started with the parents I knew best. Maya, whose son Leo was in Lily's class. We'd had park playdates, shared exasperated laughs about toddler antics. I called her, skipping the pleasantries. "Maya, it's Sam. I need to ask you something serious about Sunny Meadows." The pause on the other end was heavy. "Okay." "Has ever Leo mentioned a thinking chair or a little room, a place they go when they're in trouble?" Another pause, longer. Her voice dropped. "He calls it the sad closet. He had a phase a few months ago where he had nightmares about monsters in closets. We thought it was just a developmental thing." Her sentence trailed off, the implication hanging between us. "Why? What's going on with Lily?" I gave her the broad strokes, enough to seed alarm, but not the full graphic horror. By the end, Maya was crying quietly. "Oh God, he spilled juice last week and talked about the chair for days. I thought he was being dramatic. Sam, what do we do?" "Talk to your son, gently, see what he says. And can I put you in touch with another parent?" The network began to form, a chain of whispers through secure messaging apps, away from the public-facing parent social media groups where Sunny Meadows staff might lurk. We connected with Charlie's parents, the kicker of doors. Their story mirrored ours, but with a darker edge. Charlie, a spirited, energetic boy, had been labeled aggressive and defiant. His calm time sessions were more frequent, sometimes twice a day. He'd started bedwetting again, a habit he'd broken a year ago. He had a recurring line, "My happy got stuck in the dark." Each conversation was a fresh punch to the gut. A girl named Emma had developed a stutter. A boy named Oliver had begun compulsively chewing on his shirt sleeves. The symptoms varied, but the source was the same. The climate of fear, the threat of punitive isolation. Our first move was digital reconnaissance. We combed through every photo, every note on the Brightwheel app for the last 6 months. What had once seemed like charming snapshots now felt like evidence. We looked for backgrounds, for the expressions of other children. We found 3 other photos tagged as calm time or taking a break. In each, the child, a little boy with glasses, a girl with red pigtails, had the same hollow, resigned look Lily had worn. The background was always a blur, but in one, if you zoomed in to the pixelated edge, you could see a mop bucket in the corner. We reviewed the meal logs. We cross-referenced days Lily had barely eaten with days she'd been unusually quiet at pickup. The correlation wasn't perfect, but it was there. Days of reported great eating and happy play were rare. More common were notes like needed encouragement to eat or quiet during circle time. They're documenting their own neglect, David said grimly, staring at the spreadsheet we'd created. The encouragement is probably a threat. The quiet is shut down. Next, we turned to the parent community. Maplehaven was a small town wrapped in a thick blanket of polite silence. Disrupting that silence was a social risk, but our child's well-being vaporized any concern for niceties. I started with the parents I knew best, Maya. The 48-hour deadline passed in a suffocating vacuum of silence. No call from Richard Greer, no email from Eleanor Vance. The only communication was an automated, cheerful reminder from the Sunny Meadows billing system about our upcoming tuition, now past due. The gall of it was a fresh, bitter sting. It was their opening gambit in the war we'd declared. Pretend nothing is wrong, maintain the facade, and hope the troublesome parents wear themselves out. We did not wear out. We hardened. David and I spent the weekend in a state of grim, focused mobilization. Our living room, once a place of toy-strewn comfort, became a command center. A large whiteboard was propped against the bookshelf, timelines and names scrawled in colored marker. Legal pads were filled with notes, questions, and strategy. The other parents in our nascent coalition, Maya, Charlie's parents Ben and Sophia, and 3 others we'd connected with, communicated via an encrypted group chat that hummed with nervous energy and shared fury. Our first formal salvo was not a shout, but a meticulously crafted packet of documents sent via certified mail to the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care, EEC, the state licensing board. It contained our sworn statements, a summary of the children's consistent non-coached testimonies, the annotated photo and log evidence, and a formal complaint detailing violations of multiple state regulations, improper use of isolation, a clear violation of positive guidance mandates, creating an environment of fear, and potentially neglectful supervision. We CC'd the local Department of Children and Families. We were no longer just angry parents. We were petitioners to the state, demanding an official audit of the reality behind Sunny Meadows' smile. On Monday morning, the counterattack began. It was subtle, insidious, and designed to make us look exactly like what Greer and Vance likely called us in private: unstable, overzealous, lying troublemakers. It started with Maya. She called me, her voice trembling. "Sam, I just got a call from Eleanor. She said she was following up about our shared concerns, but then she started asking really pointed questions. Did Leo have a history of night terrors before Sunny Meadows? Had we considered an evaluation for anxiety?" She mentioned, very sympathetically, that sometimes highly sensitive children can misinterpret a teacher's firm guidance as something more threatening. "She's building a case," I said, my stomach churning, "patholizing our kids, making it seem like the problem is with them, not the environment." She also asked if we'd been under a lot of stress at home lately, Maya whispered. I felt like I was being interrogated. She was so kind about it. It made me doubt myself for a second. That was the genius of it. The outright denial would have fueled our fire. This soft, concerned questioning was a psychological fog, meant to disorient and sow doubt. By afternoon, 2 other families reported similar calls. The Sunny Meadows script was clear. Frame the children as emotionally fragile and the parents as projecting their own stress onto the daycare. Then came the social pressure. Maplehaven's online parent forum, usually a placid sea of questions about lost water bottles and recommendations for piano teachers, saw a sudden suspicious surge of posts praising Sunny Meadows. "We've been at Sunny Meadows for 3 years and it's been nothing but wonderful. The teachers are angels," one post read, from an account created that very day. Another, "So grateful for the caring professional staff who handle my spirited toddler with such patience." The comments were a chorus of amplified performative support. It was astroturfing, a digital Potemkin village of satisfaction designed to isolate us and make our claims look like bizarre outliers. The most damaging blow, however, was interpersonal. At the town grocery store on Tuesday, I ran into Kendra, a mother whose daughter was in the preschool room at Sunny Meadows. We were casual acquaintances, friendly in line at pickup. This time, her smile was strained, and she physically took a small step back when she saw me. "Sam, hi," she said, her eyes darting to my cart, as if checking for signs of madness. "Hi, Kendra. How's Ava?" "She's good. Great." She paused, fidgeting with her shopping list. "Listen, I heard you're having some issues with the sunflower room." "We have very serious concerns, yes," I said, holding her gaze. She looked pained. "It's just, we love it there. Miss Melissa has been so good for Ava. I'd hate to see a good teacher's reputation ruined because of misunderstandings." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Melanor mentioned you'd pulled Lily out. She said you were very upset. Understandably so, if you believe what you believe." The message was delivered with a veneer of neighborly concern. You are a believing, upset mother. What you believe is not reality. You are a danger to a good teacher's reputation. The community whisper network, which we had used to build our coalition, was now being used against us to paint us as hysterical pariahs. I came home from that encounter feeling soiled and furious. They're gaslighting the entire town, I spat to David, unloading groceries with more force than necessary. He was at the table, staring at his laptop. It's worse than that. Look at this. He turned the screen toward me. It was the LinkedIn profile of a woman named Dr. Alana Finch. Her title was developmental psychologist, early childhood consultant. Her profile listed Sunny Meadows as a client. She's published articles on resilience-based discipline in group care. Guess who just agreed to conduct an independent review of Sunny Meadows' practices at the request of the ownership? Our demand for an independent audit had been perverted. They'd hired their own consultant. She's a hired gun. She'll produce a report saying everything is within appropriate guidelines, maybe recommend a few communication workshops for staff, I said, the taste of defeat bitter in my mouth. Exactly, David said, slamming the laptop shut. They're constructing an official narrative, one where they're the proactive professional institution addressing baseless concerns, and we're a fringe group of malcontents. It's a PR strategy, not a child welfare strategy. The sense of powerlessness was a physical weight. We had truth, but they had a system, one designed to absorb criticism, deflect blame, and protect itself. The official smile was a shield, and we were throwing ourselves against it. Our salvation came from an unexpected and bureaucratic quarter, the state. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang with an unknown number with a Boston area code. Is this Samantha Thorne? This is Investigator Luis Gutierrez from the Department of Early Education and Care. We received your complaint. We'll be conducting an unannounced site visit at Sunny Meadows Early Learning Center tomorrow. The relief was so profound my knees went weak. Tomorrow? Thank you. Our visits are routine when we receive specific, actionable complaints, he said, his voice neutral, professional. We'll be assessing compliance with Regulations 606 CMR 7.00. We may need to speak with you and the other complainants afterwards. The state was moving. The official machinery, slow and creaking, was engaging. Our packet of evidence had been actionable. It had pierced the local fog. We immediately alerted our coalition. The instruction was simple. If you are contacted by a state investigator, tell the truth. Tell every detail. Do not soften it. Do not let their official smile intimidate you. The next day we waited. The whiteboard in our command center felt obsolete. The real battle had shifted to the bland linoleum-floored rooms of Sunny Meadows, where a state investigator would be asking to see the quiet reflection space. At 3:15 p.m., my phone rang again. Investigator Gutierrez. Mrs. Thorne, we completed our visit. I'm calling from my car. My heart was in my throat. And? We found the space you described, a utility closet approximately 4 by 6 feet, containing cleaning supplies, a water heater, and a single small plastic chair. There is no window. The door has a lock on the interior knob, a push-button type. Staff stated it is used for time away and that the lock is for safety to prevent other children from entering. I closed my eyes. They'd admitted it. They'd tried to justify it. Did they admit to locking children inside? The director stated children are supervised, but when pressed on how, she was unable to provide a clear answer beyond checking on them. The staff member named in your complaint, Melissa Carter, was inconsistent in her description of the procedure. More concerningly, his tone shifted, a hint of grim satisfaction entering his professional cadence. Our review of sign-in sheets and staff schedules indicates that on multiple dates referenced in your complaint, the mandated staff-to-child ratio in the sunflower room was not met. There were periods where only one teacher was present for 12 children, particularly during post-lunch and pre-nap transitions. State law requires 2. My breath caught. Neglect. Not just questionable discipline, but quantifiable regulatory neglect. The isolation was horrifying. The understaffing made it inevitable, and even more dangerous. What happens now? We will be issuing a preliminary finding of non-compliance. This includes citations for inadequate supervision, inappropriate use of isolation, and failure to maintain a positive, nurturing environment. They have 15 days to respond with a plan of correction. This will be a public record. We will also be forwarding our findings to DCF for their assessment of potential. The state's preliminary finding was our Excalibur, but wielding it in the court of public opinion required a strategy more nuanced than a broadsword swing. Richard Greer's email had been a masterclass in spin, transforming gross violations into enhanced training. We couldn't just shout our truth. We had to methodically dismantle the lie, mirror shard by mirror shard. Our coalition met in our living room on Saturday, the air thick with shared purpose and nervous energy. Ben, Charlie's father, a normally jovial IT manager, had shadows under his eyes. Sophia, his wife, clutched a steaming mug like a lifeline. Maya sat curled in an armchair, her phone a constant, anxious weight in her hand. Greer's email is a PR move, David began, standing before our whiteboard. It now had 2 columns, their narrative and the evidence. They're counting on parents being too busy, too trusting, or too conflict-averse to dig deeper. They're offering a palatable story. We're always improving. Our job is to make the real story impossible to ignore. We devised a multi-pronged attack, each step designed to apply pressure where Sunny Meadows was most vulnerable: its reputation, its wallet, and its legal standing. Prong 1. The truth in plain sight. We would not whisper in encrypted chats anymore. We created a simple, stark, single-page website on a neutral platform. No hysterical fonts, no rambling testimonials, just facts. At the top, in clean type, concerns regarding Sunny Meadows Early Learning Center. Below, we listed bullet points drawn directly from the state's preliminary findings, which were public record, though buried in a state website. Finding: use of a locked utility closet for child isolation. Regulation violated. 606 CMR 7.07.16b, prohibition of punitive or frightening discipline. Finding: repeated failure to meet mandated staff-to-child ratios. Regulation violated. 606 CMR 7.06.1, staffing requirements. We included the case number. We added a link to the Massachusetts EEC website where the report would eventually be posted. At the bottom, in a smaller font, a group of concerned former Sunny Meadows parents. No names, no rants, just the cold, hard, bureaucratic truth. We printed flyers with a QR code linking to the site. Our plan was not to stand on street corners shouting, but to place them quietly in the pediatricians' offices, the children's library, the coffee shops where parents congregated. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let the curiosity of a QR code do the work that our impassioned pleas might not. Prong 2. The financial squeeze. David, with his meticulous mind, had analyzed the Sunny Meadows contract and the state's violation codes. The breach of staffing ratios is a material breach of contract, he explained. We didn't pay for one teacher to manage 12 toddlers while another child was locked in a closet. We paid for a specific, state-mandated level of care and supervision. They didn't provide it. We're demanding a full refund of the last 6 months of tuition in writing, citing the state findings as cause. Every family in our coalition sent an identical certified letter to Richard Greer and Eleanor Vance, with a copy to the EEC investigator. It wasn't about the money, though the collective sum was substantial. It was about establishing documented financial liability. It was a line in the sand. You caused harm, and you will be held accountable, starting with your revenue stream. Prong 3. The legal shadow. We pooled our resources for a 1-hour consultation with a family law attorney who specialized in education and negligence. Her name was Anya Desai, and she had the calm, sharp demeanor of a raptor. She listened to our story, reviewed the state findings, and her eyes hardened. What you're describing moves beyond regulatory non-compliance into potential tort claims, negligent supervision, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The locked closet is a particularly damning fact pattern. The state's finding gives you tremendous leverage. She advised us to hold off on filing suit, for now. Let the state process run its course. Let your refund demands and public information campaign increase the pressure. The discovery process in a civil suit would be illuminating for them. They know that. Use it as a specter. We left her office feeling both empowered and chilled. We were now playing a game where the next move could be a suit. The stakes were no longer just about Lily's recovery or other children's safety. They were about bankrupting a business and destroying lives. The weight of that was sobering, but the image of Lily's vacant stare in that photo steeled our resolve. The following Monday, the fractures in Sunny Meadows' perfect mirror began to show to the wider world. A mother from the toddler room, not part of our original group, called me. Her voice was shaky. I got your flyer at the library. I scanned the code. Is it true? The locked closet? It's true. The state confirmed it. She began to cry. My son, Jamie, he's been having these awful tantrums at diaper changes. He screams, no dark, no chair. I thought it was a weird phase. Oh my God. She joined our coalition that afternoon, her testimony a fresh horror. Jamie was only 18 months old. Then, the staff turnover, the silent hemorrhage we'd hoped for, began. We heard through the fractured grapevine, a former teacher's aide who had quit months ago and was now willing to talk. Maya connected with her. The young woman, who asked to be called Jay, met her at a park, paranoid about being seen. It was the culture, Jay whispered, pulling her hoodie tighter. Miss Melissa, she wasn't a monster. She was just overwhelmed and had bought into the system. The thinking chair was Vance's idea. She called it a consequence with clarity. If a kid disrupted the routine, they lost the privilege of being with the group. We were so understaffed, especially after lunch, it was easier to put a problem child in the closet than to manage the chaos. We were told to log it as quiet time or sensory break. She looked sick. I quit because of Charlie. He was in there screaming, and Melissa just turned the music up. She said, he needs to learn he can't scream his way out of a consequence. I knew it was wrong. I'm so sorry. Jay's testimony was the missing piece. It confirmed the practice was directive from above, systematic, and involved the conscious deception of the logs. It wasn't one rogue teacher. It was a sanctioned, toxic protocol. The most significant crack appeared on Wednesday in the form of a local news reporter, Mark Chen. He'd gotten wind of the state investigation, perhaps from a tip, perhaps from scanning the public EEC filings. He called me. "I'm working on a story about daycare oversight in the county," he said, his voice careful. "I understand you filed a complaint against Sunny Meadows that prompted a state visit with significant findings." My instinct was to slam the phone down. The press was a wild card, a potential cyclone that could destroy careful strategy. But David gestured for me to wait. He scribbled on a notepad, "On the record, facts only, state docs." I took a breath. "Yes, that's correct. We have, and the Department of Early Education and Care did find serious violations during their unannounced visit last week." "Can you tell me about the violations?" "I can direct you to the state's preliminary report, which is a public document," I said, reciting our website URL. "It details the use of an inappropriate isolation space and failure to meet staffing ratios. Our primary concern, as parents, is that the center's response has been to minimize and reframe these violations rather than take full accountability for the harm caused to children." I gave him nothing more than the facts we had already placed in the public domain. No emotional anecdotes about Lily, no names of other children, just the dry, hard, bureaucratic language of the state. "And the center's owner, Richard Greer, emailed parents calling it a routine visit and voluntary enhancements," Mark noted. "You'll have to ask Mr. Greer about his characterization," I said. "The EEC report speaks for itself." The article appeared online late Friday afternoon. The headline was restrained but devastating. "State cites Maple Haven daycare for isolation and understaffing." It quoted directly from the preliminary findings: locked utility closet, inadequate supervision. It included Greer's email statement about voluntary enhancements and, crucially, ended with a quote from a child psychology expert at the state university who called prolonged isolation of toddlers psychologically damaging and a practice rooted in coercion, not care. The official smile was now smeared across the local news. The fallout was immediate and visceral. Our encrypted chat exploded. Panicked parents who had never spoken to us were reaching out, demanding to know if their child's room was involved. The local newspaper article was a depth charge in the placid pond of Maple Haven. For days, the town hummed with a low, scandalized energy. The story was shared, dissected, and debated in supermarket aisles and on community Facebook groups now locked down by frantic moderators. Sunny Meadows, once a trusted institution, had become a synonym for whispered suspicion. Our little coalition, once a secret cell, was now a known entity. We were the ones who had pulled the fire alarm in a crowded theater. Some saw us as heroes. Many more, we sensed, saw us as troublemakers who had shattered an illusion of safety everyone had desperately wanted to believe. The center's response shifted from polished deflection to a desperate, aggressive containment. Richard Greer's next email to families was a masterwork of legalistic threat wrapped in wounded pride. "Dear Sunny Meadows family, it is with profound disappointment that we address the recent inaccurate and inflammatory media coverage regarding our center. A small group of disgruntled former parents, in conjunction with a reporter seeking sensational headlines, have conspired to misrepresent a routine regulatory review and smear the dedicated professionals who care for your children. Let us be unequivocally clear. The safety and well-being of your children is our sacred commitment. The referenced space was an approved, supervised quiet area, never used for isolation as grotesquely portrayed. The staffing logs in question involved minor, inadvertent clerical errors, which we have already corrected. We have retained counsel and are pursuing all legal avenues against those responsible for these defamatory falsehoods. We will not allow the life's work of our incredible teachers to be destroyed by malicious fiction. Sunny Meadows remains open, strong, and committed to your families. We welcome the opportunity to speak with any parent directly to address concerns. Sincerely, Richard Greer and the Sunny Meadows Board." It was a declaration of war. The gloves were off. The phrase, "pursuing all legal avenues," was a chilling, deliberate message meant for us. It was meant to scare us into silence, to make us calculate the cost of a defamation lawsuit against our mortgage, our savings, our peace. The weight of it landed on our coalition like a physical blow. Maya called me in tears. My husband's boss asked him about it at the country club. He said it's becoming a thing. What if they sue us? We can't afford that. Ben and Sophia were more defiant but strained. "Let them try. We have the state report," Ben said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. The abstract concept of legal pressure had become a tangible specter threatening their livelihood. The personal attacks began to bleed offline. At the town pharmacy, a woman I recognized from Sunny Meadows pickups, her son was in the preschool room, cut in front of me in line, giving me a look of pure venom. "Some people have nothing better to do than tear down the good people who watch our kids so we can work," she said loudly to the cashier, who looked mortified. I was being socially quarantined. The neighborhood felt colder. The simple act of checking the mail felt exposed. Paranoia, that insidious vine, began to creep in. Was that a strange car parked a little too long down the street? Was our home, the place that was supposed to be Lily's sanctuary, now a target? The true cost, however, was measured not in social slights or legal threats, but in the weariness that seeped into David and Mai's interactions. We were united in purpose, but frayed at the edges by constant vigilance. Our conversations were tactical, logistical. The easy intimacy of before, the silly jokes, the shared daydreams about a future vacation had been displaced by a grinding shared trauma. We were soldiers in a trench together, but the trench was our own home. And through it all, Lily was our fragile barometer. She was making progress, infinitesimally slow. She'd started to play with her toys again, though her games were often about rescuing stuffed animals from under blankets. She'd begun to sleep through the night more often, though she still needed a nightlight so bright it cast shadows. The word school no longer triggered a meltdown, but a quiet, worried look. The daycare had broken her trust in the world's basic safety, and we were painstakingly trying to glue it back together, one reassuring hug, one predictable routine at a time. Our fight against Sunny Meadows was in part a proxy war for her sense of justice. If we could make them accountable, perhaps she could learn that bad things don't just happen. Sometimes people are held responsible. It was a heavy lesson for a 2-year-old, but the alternative, that the people who hurt you just get to keep smiling and operating, felt like a deeper poison. The break in the siege came from within the castle walls. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. truthsunnymeadows@tempmail.com. The subject line was blank. The body contained only 3 sentences. The board is meeting tonight at 7 p.m. in Greer's office. They are voting to fire Melissa Carter and the assistant Chloe as responsible parties. They have a severance package and NDA ready to make them disappear. The rest stays the same. It was a whistleblower. Someone from inside, likely a disgruntled office staffer or a teacher from another room who was horrified by the scapegoating. The message was a gift of immense strategic value and immense moral complication. David and I stared at it. "They're going to sacrifice the foot soldiers," David said, his voice cold. "Throw Melissa and Chloe to the wolves, let them take the public blame, sign away their right to speak with a payout, and then claim the problem has been dealt with. Vance and Greer walk away clean. The system stays." The injustice of it was galling. Melissa was culpable, yes, her actions were unforgivable, but she was also a product of a toxic system designed and enforced from above. Letting her take the fall would allow the architects of that system to rebuild it, perhaps more cleverly hidden, with new compliant staff. We had a choice: expose the plan and try to stop the scapegoating, or let it happen and use the firings as further proof of the center's wrongdoing in the public eye. We called an emergency meeting of our core coalition via video chat. The faces on the screen were pale, etched with stress. "If we expose it," Maya said, chewing her lip, "we protect our source, and we show that Greer and Vance are still manipulating, still not taking real responsibility." "But if they fire Melissa, it's an admission of guilt," Ben countered. "We can go to the press and say, 'See, they fired the teacher after the state found violations. It's cleaner.'" "Cleaner for whom?" I asked, the whistleblower's email burning in my mind. "For us, or for the kids in the other rooms? If Vance and Greer stay, what's to stop them from creating a new thinking space next year with a new name?" The debate was tense. We were all exhausted, all afraid of the legal sword hanging over us. A clean public firing might be enough for the state to consider the corrective action sufficient. It might be enough for some parents to sigh of relief and move on. It would certainly be easier for us to step back from the fight. But it felt like a betrayal of the principle that the root cause must be addressed, a betrayal of the whistleblower who had risked their livelihood for the truth, and, in a way, a betrayal of Melissa and Chloe themselves, not to absolve them, but to insist that the spotlight stay on the stage managers, not just the actors. "We have to expose it," David said, his voice quiet but final. "We have to show the pattern goes all the way up. Otherwise, we've just won a skirmish, not the war. The cost of stopping now is leaving the structure intact." We voted. It was unanimous, but the air was thick with trepidation. We crafted a new post for our bare-bones website. We did not reveal the whistleblower's email. We wrote it as a reliable report from within Sunny Meadows. Sources indicate that rather than implement systemic change, Sunny Meadows leadership plans to dismiss the teachers directly named in complaints, using non-disclosure agreements and severance packages to make them disappear. This tactic isolates responsibility onto frontline staff and protects the administration and ownership who created and condoned the harmful environment. True accountability requires transparency and change at all levels. We published it at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before the board meeting was to start. Then we forwarded the link anonymously to Mark Chen, the reporter. The reaction was swift and volcanic. At 8:30 p.m., Mark Chen's follow-up story went live. "Daycare accused of seeking scapegoats," sources say. It cited our website's new post and included a biting quote from the child psychology expert. "Firing individual staff without addressing the supervisory and cultural failures that enabled the behavior is like treating a gangrenous limb with a Band-Aid. The infection remains." The board meeting, we learned later from our source, who sent a one-word follow-up, chaos, descended into shouting. The vote to fire Melissa and Chloe was postponed indefinitely. The severance packages were withdrawn. The internal rift we had hoped to exploit was now a gaping chasm. Teachers were terrified and furious. The whistleblower's risk had paid off. The following weeks were a grim, bureaucratic purgatory lived through the sterile filter of legal proceedings. Our attorney, Anya Desai, engaged in a tense dance with Sunny Meadows counsel, each side leveraging the state's damning report and the threat of public scandal against the other, culminating not in an immediate lawsuit, but in a series of sworn depositions, a formal pre-trial discovery process that felt like psychological surgery without anesthetic. We were deposed first, David and I sitting stiffly in a conference room that smelled of lemon polish and anxiety, while a court reporter transcribed every word and Richard Greer's steely-eyed lawyer probed our lives, implying our careers were too demanding, suggesting Lily had always been high-strung, and portraying our coalition as a vendetta-driven mob. It was a brutal exercise in character assassination disguised as inquiry, but we held fast to the facts, the timeline, the state's findings, and the haunting consistency of the children's stories. Then the balance of power shifted. Anya deposed Eleanor Vance, whose polished calm fractured under precise questioning about staffing logs and the specific dimensions of the quiet reflection space, her answers becoming evasive, contradictory, and finally ending in a tearful request for a break that spoke volumes more than her testimony. The crucial blow, however, came when Melissa Carter, abandoned by the center's leadership and facing the loss of her career without the promised severance, broke under oath, her defiance crumbling into exhausted confession as she admitted to the click lock on the closet door, the prolonged isolation of children, and, most devastatingly, revealed that the practice was not her innovation, but a directive from Vance, who had called it necessary structure for boundary-pushing behaviors. Her testimony, a raw mix of guilt and defensive justification, irrevocably cemented the liability at the feet of the administration, transforming our fight from a he-said-she-said into a documented chain of command, where negligence was not an accident, but policy, and the once impenetrable facade of Sunny Meadows was now legally and factually shattered from the inside out. The confessions extracted in the deposition room did not result in a dramatic courtroom showdown or a triumphant press conference. Instead, they triggered a slow, grinding collapse, the kind governed by insurance adjusters and liability waivers. Anya Desai called it the settlement phase, a term that felt both victorious and deeply unsatisfying. Richard Greer's bluster evaporated once his own attorney reviewed Melissa's sworn testimony and the state's finalized scathing report, which now included a notice of serious deficiency and a staggering fine. Facing the prospect of a public trial, revoked licensure, and ruinous civil judgments, the Sunny Meadows Corporation folded. Their lawyers made an offer, a substantial, confidential financial settlement for each of the 7 families in our core coalition, contingent upon us signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The money was life-changing, a trust fund for Lily's future therapy and education, a balm for the financial strain of our fight. But the NDA was a gag order, a muzzle of polished legal prose that would legally erase our story from the public record, silencing our warnings to other parents in perpetuity. We wrestled with the moral arithmetic for days, the tangible security for our child versus the principle of transparency. In the end, surrounded by the exhaustion of the 9-month battle and the raw daily reality of Lily's ongoing recovery, we, along with the other families, signed. We took the hollowed-out victory. The website came down, our public statements ceased, the legal war was over. The aftermath was a landscape of quiet ruins. Sunny Meadows didn't close with a bang, but with a whimper, a voluntary surrender of license, and a brief, opaque notice on their website about permanent closure to pursue other ventures. The building was sold to a dental group within months. Miss Melissa left town. Eleanor Vance's name appeared briefly in a scandal column before she faded from view. Richard Greer's other business interests seemed to absorb the hit without fatal damage. The town, eager to move on, did so with remarkable speed, the scandal buried under new gossip and the relentless churn of daily life. The fracture was repaired with the glue of collective amnesia, leaving only a faint, almost imperceptible seam for those who knew where to look. Our victory party was a silent one, held in the quiet of our own living room after Lily was asleep. David and I sat with the settlement paperwork, a check that felt like blood money, and a bottle of wine we didn't really taste. There was no toast. The cost was tallied in the deep lines on David's face that hadn't been there a year ago, in the hypervigilance that made me scan every new environment for potential quiet rooms, in the way our laughter together now had a brittle, careful quality, as if testing its strength. We had saved other children from that specific closet, perhaps. We had broken a malignant system, but the toxin had seeped into our own soil. Our marriage, once an easy partnership, was now a joint recovery unit, our conversations often circling back to therapists' appointments, parenting strategies for anxiety, and the careful management of trauma triggers. The intimacy of shared joy had been partially displaced by the intimacy of shared burden. Lily was healing, but healing is not erasure. She was a happier, more playful 3-year-old, yet certain shadows remained, a lingering fear of closed doors, a heightened startle reflex, a need for excessive reassurance about where we were going and when we would be back. She had a wonderful new home-based daycare provider, a gentle grandmotherly woman with a sprawling backyard, and a policy of endless cuddles. Lily thrived there. But sometimes, in the middle of building a block tower or coloring, she would pause, her eyes going distant for a second, and she would utter a non sequitur that sliced through me. "Remember the click, Mama?" Or, "Is that lady with the loud face gone forever?" The memories were embedded, neural pathways carved by fear. Our job was to build new, stronger pathways over them, a lifetime's work. The deepest hollow, however, was the loss of trust, not just Lily's, but ours. We had believed in systems, in licensing, in professional credentials, in shiny brochures and pedagogical jargon. That faith was annihilated. We now approached every institution, a new summer camp, a children's museum class, even a birthday party at an unfamiliar house with a covert, forensic scrutiny. We asked questions other parents found odd. What is your discipline policy? Can you describe your timeout procedure? Where do children go if they need to calm down? May we see all the spaces? We were the parents the director spoke to with careful, slightly wary smiles. We had become inconveniently knowledgeable, permanently suspicious. The world of childhood, which should feel inherently safe, was now a landscape we had to constantly map for hidden dangers. The victory made us safer, but it had also made us alone in our knowing. One afternoon, 6 months after the settlement, I was at the town playground. Lily was conquering the twisty slide, her laughter a sound that still made my heart clench with gratitude. I saw a woman I recognized from the periphery of the Sunny Meadows saga, a mother whose child had been in a different classroom. We made polite eye contact, the kind that holds unspoken history. She pushed her son on a swing for a moment, then wandered over. "How is she?" the woman asked, nodding towards Lily. "She's doing really well. It's a process." The woman nodded, looking out at the kids. "We left, right after the article, went to the church daycare." She paused, then added softly, "We never said thank you." The words were a shock, simple and profound. "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, we do," she said firmly. "We were oblivious. We trusted the smile. You broke the window so the rest of us could smell the smoke." She gave me a look that was equal parts pity and awe. "I don't know how you did it. I don't know if I could have." She went back to pushing her son. I stood there, watching Lily's yellow sweater flash down the slide. The hollow space inside me didn't fill, but it echoed differently. We had paid a terrible price for that knowledge, a price in our daughter's innocence, in our own peace, in our standing as the town's difficult family. The victory was hollow because the trauma was real and lasting. But as I watched Lily run to the swings, her fear of the dark closet perhaps forever a part of her, but no longer in control of her, I understood a final, difficult truth. The hollowness was the space where naive trust had once lived. In its place was something harder, sadder, but ultimately more resilient. A clear-eyed vigilance, a forged-in-fire love that knew the cost of safety and was willing to pay it. And a story, legally silenced but eternally remembered in the quiet of our little family, that proved even the smallest, most vulnerable voice could, with enough terrible courage, bring down a wall of lies. The victory was not sweet, it was sobering, it was scar tissue. But it was ours. And in the hollow, there was now an unbreakable strength, and the faint, enduring echo of a truth that refused to stay locked in the dark. Years are not a clean eraser, but a slow, persistent tide, smoothing the sharpest edges of trauma until what remains is not the wound itself, but the shape it left in the life that grew around it. 5 years after the click of the closet door, Lily is 8. She is a fierce, funny, sensitive kid who loves graphic novels about warrior cats and has a preternatural talent for calming anxious puppies at the animal shelter where she volunteers with David. The nightmares are rare now, historical artifacts that surface only during times of high stress, a school play, a big test. She has a faint star-shaped scar on her knee from a playground fall, but the invisible scars have softened, woven into the complex tapestry of who she is. She knows, in an age-appropriate way, that she went to a bad school when she was very little, that some grown-ups weren't safe, and that her parents fought a big fight to make it right. It's a foundational story for her, not of victimhood, but of advocacy. She is perhaps a little quicker to stand up for a friend being unfairly singled out on the soccer field, a little more attuned to the feeling of a room. The fear was metabolized, in part, into empathy. David and I, too, have been reshaped by the tide. The brittle vigilance of the first years has mellowed into a calibrated awareness. We are not the paranoid parents whispering in the corner, but we are the ones who read the parent handbook cover to cover, who attend every school board meeting, who ask the principal direct questions about bullying protocols and mental health resources. Our trust is not given freely, it is earned, and we have become connoisseurs of the small tells that signal integrity or its lack. Our marriage, tempered in that long fire, found a new equilibrium. We no longer just share a life, we share a history of a war we fought side by side. It forged a bond that is less about easy romance and more about profound, unshakable allegiance. The hollowed-out victory eventually filled not with the naive joy we'd lost, but with a deeper, more earned contentment. The settlement money sits in a trust, a cold monument to a hot pain. We used a fraction of it to pay for Lily's play therapy years ago and to ensure David could take a much-needed sabbatical. The rest is for her future, college, a gap year, a down payment on a home. It is blood money that we are determined to transmute into freedom and possibility for her. We never look at the balance without feeling the old, complex twist of guilt and grim satisfaction. The non-disclosure agreement we signed is a ghost in our lives. It legally binds our tongues from naming names or disclosing dollar amounts in public. But it cannot bind our experience, our hard-won knowledge. We have become quiet mentors to a handful of other parents over the years, friends of friends who hear a vague rumor and seek us out, their eyes wide with a dawning fear we recognize instantly. We meet for coffee, and we don't violate the letter of the NDA. We don't say, Sunny Meadows, or Melissa. Instead, we say, trust your gut. We say, ask to see all the spaces, especially the ones not on the tour. We say, if they use the phrase self-regulation, ask them to demonstrate exactly what that looks like. We say, your child's sudden profound behavior change is a symptom, not a diagnosis. We give them the questions to ask, the logs to request, the hidden things to look for. We pass on the compass we forged in the dark so they can navigate their own suspicions. It is our form of quiet, ongoing rebellion, a way to honor the whistleblower who once helped us. One crisp autumn Saturday, we are at a fall festival in a neighboring town. Lily is on David's shoulders, pointing at a pumpkin carving contest. The air smells of cider donuts and wood smoke. It is a picture of normal family bliss. And then, I see her. Eleanor Vance is 50 feet away, manning a booth for a local charity. Her sleek gray bob is the same, but her face has settled into softer, more resigned lines. She is handing out brochures, her smile professional, muted. Our eyes meet across the crowd. There is a jolt, a surge of old electric fury that instantly cools into something else, a profound, weary recognition. The past is not a ghost, it is a person selling raffle tickets for a pet shelter. I feel David stiffen beside me. He's seen her too. Lily, sensing the shift, looks down. What's wrong, Daddy? Nothing, Bug. Just saw someone from a long time ago. We have a choice. We can turn away, melt into the crowd, protect our peace. We can let the silent, settled past lie. But something in me, the part that is no longer afraid of making a scene, the part that fought the war, wants to close the loop. I touch David's arm. I'll be right back. I walk towards the booth. The chatter and laughter of the festival seem to recede into a tunnel of silence around me. Eleanor watches me approach, her smile freezing, then dissolving into a careful, neutral mask. There is no fear in her eyes, only a guarded, exhausted preparedness. I stop in front of her table. We look at each other for a long moment, two veterans of a secret, brutal conflict. Samantha, she says, finally, her voice just as calm and measured as it was in her office a lifetime ago, but stripped now of its performative warmth. It is just a voice. Eleanor. She waits. She expects, perhaps, an accusation, a hissed curse, a final dose of righteous anger. I do not give it to her. The anger is a fossil. What I feel is a vast, sorrowful clarity. How are you? I ask. The question is not social, it is an assessment. She blinks, thrown. I'm well. I consult now, for nonprofits. A faint, ironic twist touches her lips. Governance and compliance. The perfect, horrible circle of it. The arsonist hired as a fire inspector. I nod slowly. I'm glad you found a use for your skills. The subtext hangs between us, thick and undeniable. Your skills at building facades, at writing policies that hide harm, at survival. She holds my gaze, and for a second, the mask slips entirely. I see not a monster, but a hollowed-out woman, someone who likely tells herself a story about difficult parents and misunderstood protocols to sleep at night. The true horror of it all was its banality. She wasn't evil, she was a bureaucrat of the soul, prioritizing order over humanity until the humanity broke. Your daughter, she says, the words seeming to cost her something. She must be quite grown now. She's 8, she's strong, she's happy. I say it not as a boast, but as a fact, a testament to resilience she did not crush. Eleanor nods, looking down at her brochures, aligning them into a neater pile, a pointless, orderly task. I'm glad to hear that. There is nothing more to say. No apology she could offer would be adequate, and I sense she is not capable of giving one that isn't strategically calculated. Any further words would just be mud stirred in settled water. I turn to leave. Samantha. I pause, looking back. Her eyes are on her perfectly aligned brochures. It wasn't supposed to be like that. It is the closest she will ever come to an admission, a whisper to the void. I know, I say. That's what makes it worse. I walk back to David and Lily. David's questioning look is answered by my slight shake of the head. It's done. Lily slides down from David's shoulders and grabs both our hands. Can we get a donut? The one with the sprinkles? Absolutely, David says, his voice warm and full in the present. We walk towards the food stalls, a trio linked by love and by history. The encounter with Eleanor didn't bring closure, because closure is a myth for clean stories. It brought instead a final quiet confirmation. The battle was long over. We had not just survived, we had redefined what survival meant. It didn't mean going back to who we were before. It meant integrating the scar into our strength. The stench of that closet was long gone, washed away by years and love and therapy. But the memory of it was the pivot on which our family's world had turned, and in turning, we had found a new, unshakable direction. Forward, together, eyes wide open, guarding the light we had fought so terribly to win back.